What if I told you there's a tool that can turn an ordinary decision into an extraordinary outcome? A tool that can take a small pile of money or a small amount of effort and make it feel like you've suddenly multiplied your strength tenfold. It sounds like magic, doesn't it? But here's the twist. That same tool can just as easily backfire. It can burn through your savings, ruin your business, or collapse your confidence if you don't understand how it works. That tool is leverage. And leverage, my friends, is a double-edged sword. Welcome to the long game. I'm Nathan, and in today's episode, we're going to dive deep into leverage, why it attracts both billionaires and gamblers, why it's behind some of the greatest fortunes and the greatest disasters, and how you can approach it wisely as someone playing the marathon of life, not the sprint. Think of this as a journey into one of the most powerful forces in finance, business, and even personal growth. Let's start simple. Imagine you want to invest in a property worth $10 million. You only have $2 million in cash. If you were to rely only on your own money, you'd never touch that property. But a bank steps in and says, "We'll lend you the other $8 million." Now, suddenly, you control a $10 million asset with just $2 million of your own. If that property rises 20% in value, it's worth $12 million. You sell, repay the bank, and pocket $4 million. Your $2 million doubled. On paper, you've achieved what seems impossible, a 100% return, while the property itself only grew 20%. That's leverage in action. It magnifies your gains. It feels like putting a magnifying glass under the sun. The light is the same, but now it's concentrated, powerful, and capable of starting a fire. But here's the other side of the blade. What if the property drops 20% instead? Now it's worth only $8 million. You sell, pay the bank back their $8 million, and what's left? Nothing. Your $2 million equity? Gone. And if it drops even further, say to $7 million, you don't just lose your money, you owe the bank an extra $1 million. Now you're not just back to zero, you're in debt. This is why leverage is so dangerous. It magnifies losses with the same force it magnifies gains. This duality is what makes leverage so seductive and so deadly. It feels like stepping into a sports car, pressing the accelerator and feeling the rush as the scenery blurs by. But if you hit a sharp turn at that same speed, the crash is catastrophic. The tool that helped you fly becomes the very reason you fall. And unlike a small mistake you could walk away from, mistakes under leverage carry much bigger consequences. It compresses time, shrinks your margin of error, and forces outcomes faster than you might be ready to handle. In fact, many of history's financial disasters were not caused by stupidity or lack of knowledge, but by leverage. The 2008 financial crisis, for example, was built on mountains of borrowed money. Banks and investors leveraged real estate bets so heavily that when prices slipped, the whole system cracked like glass under pressure. The same story repeats across centuries. The Great Depression, hedge fund collapses like long-term capital management, and countless bankruptcies from over-leveraged businesses. The lesson? Leverage isn't bad on its own. It's just unforgiving when you're wrong. Now, here's something worth reflecting on. Leverage isn't just about money. It exists in many forms. When you hire employees, you're leveraging their time and skills. When you use technology, you're leveraging code to multiply your output. When you build systems, processes, or even content that works while you sleep, you're using leverage. So while financial leverage is risky, other types of leverage, what Naval Ravikant calls leverage without permission, can be incredibly powerful with far less downside. Writing a book, coding an app, creating a podcast, these are all forms of leverage. They multiply your voice, your ideas, your reach, and they don't carry the risk of bankruptcy. But in this first part, I want you to remember one simple image. Leverage is fire. It can warm your house, cook your food, and make life brighter. But without control, without respect, it can burn your home to ashes. The same energy that empowers you can also consume you. The sword that cuts through barriers can also cut your own hand if you swing it carelessly. As we continue, we'll look deeper into how leverage has built empires and destroyed them, how the rich think about it differently from the poor, and how you can apply the principle of leverage in your own long game, not to gamble, but to grow. So take a breath, imagine that flame in your hand, and ask yourself, will you be the master of it or its victim? This is the long game. I'm Nathan, and in the next part, we'll explore how the wealthy use leverage as a friend, while most people unknowingly use it as a trap. Let's peel back the curtain and ask, why do some people wield leverage like a master craftsman, while others cut themselves on the same blade? The difference often lies not in access to leverage, anyone can borrow money, anyone can take risks, but in mindset, in discipline, and in strategy. The wealthy understand leverage not as a shortcut, but as a tool. The inexperienced, however, often see it as a lottery ticket. Think about the casino gambler who walks in with $100. They place bets, win a little, and then someone whispers, "Double down, borrow chips. You could make 10 times that amount tonight." The gambler's eyes light up. They're no longer playing with their own money, they're playing with leverage. If the dice rolled in their favor, they walk away feeling like a genius. But one wrong roll, and the house takes everything, including money they don't even have yet. That, in essence, is how many individuals approach leverage, excited by the upside, blind to the downside. Now compare that to a seasoned investor like Warren Buffett. Buffett is famously cautious with leverage. He's said many times that leverage is what ruins otherwise smart investors. He doesn't avoid it completely. Berkshire Hathaway uses insurance float, which is a kind of leverage, but he treats it with respect, like handling nitroglycerin. The key is this: he never puts himself in a position where a temporary loss wipes him out permanently. He plays the long game, and in the long game, survival is the ultimate edge. This is a crucial principle. Leverage doesn't change the quality of your decision. It only magnifies the consequences. If you've made a wise, long-term decision, leverage may accelerate your path. But if your decision is flawed, leverage accelerates your downfall. It's like pouring fuel onto a fire. A well-controlled flame burns brighter. An uncontrolled spark becomes an inferno. The wealthy also use different kinds of leverage. They don't only rely on borrowed money. They use financial leverage strategically, but they pair it with human leverage, operational leverage, and technological leverage. Take Jeff Bezos, for example. When Amazon was small, he didn't just leverage debt. He leveraged technology, servers, software, the internet. He leveraged human talent, building teams that could scale operations. He leveraged systems, processes, and distribution networks. By layering these forms of leverage, he created exponential power with less personal risk than someone betting their house on a margin loan. Here's a powerful thought. The richest people in the world rarely get rich just by borrowing money. They get rich by building forms of leverage that don't demand repayment. A book continues to sell after you've written it. Software keeps running after you've coded it. Videos and podcasts keep spreading your ideas long after you've spoken the words. This is leverage in its purest form. Effort that compounds without constant input. Naval Ravikant once said, "Code and media are permissionless leverage," meaning, unlike debt or hiring, you don't need anyone's approval to use them. They scale infinitely, and they don't keep you awake at night with repayment schedules. Still, financial leverage has its place. When used wisely, it can transform small advantages into massive ones. For example, real estate investors often use mortgages to acquire properties.
If the rental income comfortably covers the debt payments, and if the investor has enough reserves to weather downturns, leverage works like a silent partner, amplifying returns. But the key here is margin of safety. The smart investor doesn't borrow to the limit. They leave room for mistakes, downturns, and surprises. Because surprises will always come. Think of leverage like sailing with the wind at your back. If the sea is calm and you know your course, you move faster than ever. But if a storm hits, the same wind can capsize you. The difference between sinking and surviving is preparation. Your sails, your anchors, your ability to cut speed when needed. And here's another subtle truth. Not all leverage looks like leverage. Take time, for example. When you delegate tasks to someone else, you're leveraging their hours to free up your own. When you automate processes, you're leveraging machines to handle repetitive work. Even reputation can be a form of leverage. Trust earned over years allows you to attract opportunities that others never see. These forms don't carry the same obvious risk as borrowed money, but they still demand responsibility. If you misuse people's trust or build shaky systems, the crash comes in different but equally painful ways. The wealthy learn to balance these. They ask, where can I take smart leverage that won't kill me if I'm wrong? They avoid the temptation to stretch every dollar, every resource to the maximum. Because when you play the long game, the real enemy is not going slow, it's being forced out of the game entirely. This is why you often hear Buffett say, it's not necessary to do extraordinary things to get extraordinary results. Instead of chasing quick wins with high leverage, he focuses on consistent compounding, where small advantages accumulate over decades. It's less exciting, but infinitely more powerful. The impatient investor sees leverage as a way to get rich faster. The patient investor sees leverage as a way to accelerate a sound strategy, never to substitute for one. So here's the lesson of this second part. Leverage is not just financial. It's human, technological, reputational, and systemic. The poor and the impatient often reach for the most dangerous form, debt, while the rich and the wise build safer forms that scale quietly and powerfully. Leverage doesn't care who you are. It only cares whether you respect its power. As we move into the final part, we'll talk about you. How should an individual, someone building their long game in finance, career, and personal growth, approach leverage? How do you decide when to embrace it, when to avoid it, and how to build forms of leverage that compound without risking collapse? Stay with me. This is the long game. I'm Nathan, and in the next part, we'll turn the double-edged sword into an ally.
Now let's bring it home. We've seen leverage as a force of destruction and creation. We've seen how the wealthy treat it differently from the reckless. But the real question is, how should you, in your own long game, approach leverage? Because at some point, whether in money, career, or even personal growth, you'll face the temptation to amplify. And the choice you make will shape not just your wealth, but your resilience. First, let's make one thing clear. You don't have to reject leverage completely. What you need is a framework, a set of rules that helps you use it wisely without letting it destroy you. So let's break it down. Rule number 1, never bet the farm. This may sound simple, but many smart people forget it. When you leverage, you must assume that things can and will go wrong. If the worst-case scenario wipes you out, the leverage was too high. This is why Buffett, Munger, and other masters emphasize survival over speed. It's better to compound at a steady rate for decades than to chase a quick win that could end the game tomorrow. Ask yourself, if this bet fails, will I still be in the game? If the answer is no, step back. Rule number 2, know your margin of safety. Leverage tightens the rope, leaving less room for mistakes.
If you borrow for a property, don't max out at the highest loan possible. Leave reserves for downturns, vacancies, and emergencies. If you take on projects at work, don't overload with commitments. Leave room for delays and setbacks. If you're using technology as leverage, don't depend on a single fragile system. Build backups, redundancies, and alternative paths. Margin of safety is what keeps leverage from turning lethal. Rule number 3, build leverage that doesn't demand repayment. This is where the real wealth lies. Financial debt is one form, but the most powerful leverage is creative, technological, and social. Write a book, and it can sell forever. Record a podcast, and it can reach new audiences while you sleep. Code an app, and it can scale to millions without your constant presence. Build a reputation, and opportunities will come to you without you having to chase them. These forms of leverage compound over time, and unlike loans, they don't keep knocking at your door demanding interest. Rule number 4, respect the cycle of emotions. Leverage plays with psychology as much as with numbers. When things go up, you feel invincible, and that's when you're most likely to overextend. When things go down, fear grips you, and that's when you're most likely to panic. A disciplined mind is as important as a disciplined portfolio. The wealthy survive leverage not just because of their strategies, but because of their ability to stay calm, rational, and patient under stress. They treat leverage like a dangerous animal, never turning their back, never underestimating it. Rule number 5, think in decades, not days. Leverage tempts you to fast forward, to turn years of growth into months. But long-term wealth, long-term careers, and long-term fulfillment are never built overnight. Ask yourself, if I take on this leverage, will it still make sense in 10 years? Will I still be proud of the risks I took? If the answer is no, then it's not aligned with the long game. The key is not to win fast, but to last long enough to let compounding work its magic. Now, let's make this more personal. Maybe you're not managing billions like Buffett, or building a tech empire like Bezos. Maybe you're just trying to grow your savings, build a side hustle, or advance in your career. Leverage still matters. In money, don't chase quick riches through margin loans or dangerous bets. Focus instead on building assets that pay you repeatedly. Rental properties, dividend stocks, small businesses, or creative products. In career, don't just work harder. Use leverage by building systems, learning skills that scale, and surrounding yourself with people who multiply your strengths. In life, don't just spend your hours. Invest them in habits, health, and relationships that keep paying back. Each of these is leverage, and unlike pure financial debt, they create compounding that supports you, not crushes you. Here's the big insight. Leverage isn't inherently good or bad. It's neutral power. Like electricity, it can light up a city or electrocute you. What matters is how you design the circuit. If you approach leverage with greed, impatience, or ignorance, it will punish you. If you approach it with respect, knowledge, and discipline, it can transform your life. Think of your long game like climbing a mountain. You can climb slowly with your own strength, step by step. Leverage is like adding ropes, pulleys, and gear. Used well, it helps you climb higher, faster, safer. Used recklessly, it snaps and you fall. The mountain is the same. The climber is the same. The difference is how you use the tools. So here's what I want you to take away today. Leverage is a double-edged sword.
It magnifies everything, your wisdom or your foolishness, your patience or your greed, your strengths or your weaknesses. If you respect it, if you master it, it becomes your ally in compounding. If you ignore its risks, it becomes the very reason you fail. Play the long game. Don't gamble your survival for speed. Build leverage that multiplies you without endangering you. And remember, the goal is not to win the sprint, it's to stay in the marathon, letting every step, every decision, every compounded effect carry you further. This is the long game. I'm Nathan R. Bang, and may you always use the sword with wisdom, so it cuts through obstacles, never through yourself.